but I
Mhm.
might be like one of two, you know, software related salespeople on the Cape. Um, but yeah, that's where life currently has me situated.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're about three or four after. Probably can get started here, and those that come on can catch us up.
Excellent. Sounds great. So welcome everybody to today's session from scans to strategy, vulnerability management that executives understand. Thank you very much to Connect Secure for putting this together and executing. Joining me today, um, former Navy alum Ryan Seymour, VP of Consulting and Education over at Connect Secure. Also joining me is CISO Brian Blakely, and then myself. I'll be moderating Frank Bauer, Director of Security Solutions Consultants here at PAX8. So Ryan and Brian, before we dive in, let's help the audience understand a little bit more about your roles and what you do on a functional basis.
Yeah, so again, Ryan Seymour, VP Consulting Education. I've been in the industry now about 20 years working professionally, and in my role, I am focused on curating content for our consulting, our pro service, and our support teams. It's really about partner success and partner enablement and being able to take, what is a tool, the vulnerability management platform, but having the resources that you need to support the tool. So, having everything from webinars like these, all of our user documentation, all of our consulting and pro services, and then even, getting into to some of the content that we're creating out in our university. So, my role is really about bringing education content forward and helping partners be more efficient with their tools and not just have a tool but actually have a strategy behind it. So it's a little bit about my role, and it's look forward to talking with you guys today and appreciate you guys being here.
Awesome. And how long have you been in the MSP space?
It's been about 20 years now. So early on in my career, I started working for an MSP in Southeast Michigan back in the early 2000s. And transitioned from an MSP. I spent about 9 years working for ConnectWise down in Tampa, the ConnectWise PSA, I'm sure everyone's aware of. And after ConnectWise, I started my own consulting business. I ran that for about 5 or 6 years or so. And then Connect Secure acquired my consulting business, and I landed on the Connect Secure team. So I have played MSP, I have played vendor, I have played consultant. I've got a great, unique perspective, I think, around the table. So hopefully that will lend itself useful as we share some insights today.
Yeah, amazing. So well versed in the MSP community. And then similarly, Brian, tell us a little bit about your role at Connect Secure, and how long you've been working with MSPs.
Yeah, Brian Blakely here, Chief Information Security and Compliance Nerd here at Connect Secure, and I've spent really the better part of the last few decades anyway. I'm old, building, leading, operationalizing security and compliance programs as a full-time and a fractional CISO, as an MSP owner and operator, and as someone who's spent plenty of time in leadership team meetings, boardrooms, translating, I think, technical risk into business discussions and decisions. And after all those years, one thing I think is crystal clear to me: the biggest vulnerability in most organizations isn't unpatched software; it's unaligned leadership. So my goal today really is to bring that business perspective and try to help us bridge that gap, right? To show how we can turn technical findings into business conversations that executives, not only do they understand it and can digest and consume it, but can prioritize on it, act on it, and ultimately give us money, right? We need budget to do these things.
Awesome, appreciate that. Well, welcome everybody. I think everybody has had an opportunity to join. And again, thank you to Ryan and Brian for the background there. All right, so we just went through introduction, folks. We're going to spend about maybe 5-10 minutes on challenges and problems Then we're going to shift into the strategy that Brian essentially alluded to. We're going to get into what defensibility looks like, and then the Connect Secure team will share some additional partner resources that are available, and then we'll wrap it up with some final thoughts, takeaways, and Q&A. All right. So, what challenges essentially exist in the market today? What we're finding in the MSP space is MSPs are conducting vulnerability scans, but they're really having, and a lot of MSPs are doing this and they're doing it regularly, and that's good. And that's an advancement from where we were before. But it's to a degree, it's ad hoc, it's causing noise. We're having a hard time, much as we had already alluded to, translating those into business value, business impacting conversations. And that's really what we're trying to help you folks with today, is distill down the noise, understand what what those scans are producing, and then translating it into business impacting conversations. Okay. That's going to help you be able to better sell and position your organization as a cybersecurity expert. Okay. So today we're going to talk about a few things. And this is really where we want to jump into the Q&A with the team and just have a conversation with you folks to better understand the strategy behind vulnerability management. So, Brian, I'll open with you. In your work with MSPs, where do you see the biggest gap between running scans and having defensible vulnerability management program?
Yeah, Frank, and thanks for setting up the problem. And I think when I think of the biggest gap I see is that most MSPs treat vulnerability management as a tool, right? Not a program. So everybody silently can repeat after me, scanning is not a strategy. Okay, scanning is not a strategy. So running scans is easy, right? The hard part, I think, is often what happens next? What do we do next? And Ryan talks very eloquently about a defensible program. And I think, when you have a defensible program, means you can show that you have a repeatable process, right? There's people and processes involved, not just the tool and the scanning. So you have a repeatable process that you can identify and prioritize, remediate, and even verify the vulnerabilities, right? And that you can demonstrate that process to an auditor or a regulator or a board, right? All too often, I think what we see is we deliver reports that say, here's 4,000 vulnerabilities, and we jump up and down, and we want the reader to get all upset and crazy and to pay for it and say, fix me. But there's no documented risk decision process, right? There's no SLA really by severity or no defined remediation workflows, no communication loop. Biggest thing that I hope we can talk more about today, that communication loop back to the client. So that's not vulnerability management, it's vulnerability exposure. So the big leap, that maturity leap, I think happens when we align our scanning cadence and patching cycles and reporting metrics directly to business impact. When you can say, this is our defined process, here's our trend over a period of time, and here's how we measure reduction in exploitable business risk, that's when I think your clients start seeing you, not as a vendor, but more as a strategic business partner. And Ryan, I hope I didn't steal any thunder around defensible vulnerability programs. I really love your talk track around that. So I stole it a little bit in my response there.
No, it's all good. I think you nailed it, and I kind of echo what Brian said. Is I think the biggest gap between the scanner is the intent that the organizations have that they go with these tools, right? Most organizations are treating vulnerability management like it's a task, right? Run the scan, hand over the report, check the box. That's not a defensible program, right? It needs to really start with, what matters most. Are you protecting what matters most? What business processes are you protecting? Right? What's tolerance for downtime and exposure? How is it impacting the actual business? Again, to Brian's point, executives very, very rarely care about CVEs and patches and all the technical jargon that we're all so really good at finding and displaying. You got to take a moment and translate, right? Scans just give you data, but a program is what gives you the actual strategy and the direction. And so defensible programs are really good at tying the technical findings to the assets, validate exploitability, prioritize based on your business impacts, and it actually tracks remediation. And if you don't do all of that, all you have is a collection of reports and not actual cyber program. You just have a scanner. So again, I think the biggest gap is us diving into the tools, because all of us in this industry are pretty damn smart. Most people I talk to in this space are really smart. And if I give you a brand new tool that you've never seen, you can probably figure out how to work it and get it set up. But again, I think we need to pause for a moment and make sure that our program is documented, leadership has buy-in, it's been authorized by leadership, it's been aligned with a framework, and everybody knows their place. I mean, you got to have orders, otherwise you just have a bunch of people running around with best intentions, and that's where inconsistency starts happening, and all the things that you don't want. So I think it's pausing and having a defensible strategy, which really just means have a documented policy and a program, ready to go. And if that's something that, the organizations here don't have, we curate those for organizations, right? We have templates that are available, and it doesn't matter if you're using Connect-Secure or not. Defensibility needs to be documented with any tool you're using. It doesn't have to be Connect-Secure specific. So a lot of the stuff that Brian and I work on is product ambiguous, because these principles should apply across your organization regardless of insert tool name here, right? It doesn't matter what you're using. So that to me is one of the biggest gaps that we see.
Yeah, 100%. And you touched on it, having that, and I'm taking notes. So if you see me heads down, folks, that's because I'm literally writing, and taking notes as we, work through this together. Having that documented, repeatable process so that you can build a cybersecurity program which is defensible, right? So through that conversation, to me, what really sticks out is being able to have that, again, documented, repeatable process that leads to a secure, cybersecurity program that ultimately helps make your organization more defensible. Additionally, 1000% agree. We got to get away from the techno jargon that our industry uses so often, the CVEs, et cetera. Look, my sister is the director of 4 assisted living facilities. She does not know what a CVE is, right? And that's, to a degree, that's our audience. Somebody is selling. I know for a fact that she's working with an MSP, right? That's our audience. And if she doesn't know what a CVE is, most executives aren't. Awesome. Great conversation. Good way to kick it off. All right. So for the next one, most ITs are drowning in vulnerability data, sometimes thousands, tens of thousands of findings, in endless reports. So Ryan, what are some of the first steps to turning all of that noise into something that drives real business outcomes? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, most definitely. I think
Perfect.
we all are dealing with this, whether you're in, managed IT operations or cybersecurity operations, whatever group that happens to fall on at your organization. We see you run the scan and you got, 20,000 findings. And so now the overwhelming part begins. And it's the $1 million question. We hear it all the time. Hey, Ryan, what should I work on first? I don't know where to begin. This is like eating an elephant, right? There's so much here. I don't know where to start. And obviously, I think the immediate gut reaction for everybody is chase down criticals and highs. right? Everybody just dives into those findings and they go right to the severity and they go right for critical high and reds and high scores. And obviously that can make an impact on risk. But to me, what really should be happening first is protect what matters most. Again, I like to always go back to that. What's the most important assets in that environment based on other factors that are not just technical severity? All right, we have all that telemetry, the NVD, EPSS, right? We have telemetry we can go off to help prioritize. But I think before we get to that moment, we need to be looking at things like, is it internet facing? Right? Internet facing assets are generally more important than assets that are protected inside the network. A low or a medium severity CVE on a firewall should take precedence over a high vulnerability on a printer in the back office. Right? So I think internet facing, what's mission critical to the business? What is the most important stuff in the business? Again, I always go back to MSPs are really smart at knowing what critical infrastructure looks like, right? We always go to the firewalls, we go to the servers, and we're looking for those high priority devices. But many times inside networks, there are devices that are mission critical to the business that aren't the firewall, that aren't the server, right? It's that special workstation in the corner that they use to process orders, or it's that shared printer that everybody's printing and 80% of the orders get printed to this certain printer. Well, from a scanning tool, a printer doesn't look very important. But if that printer is responsible for 80% of the print jobs at the organization, that is a critical piece of infrastructure for the customer. So again, I always go back to, when you prioritize remediation, are you protecting what matters most to the business, not to you, but to the customer? So I'd like to have a strategy, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, how you can start identifying those. So I'll triage that over to Brian. I think there's many other ways you could prioritize, but to me, protect what matters most is always the message.
Yeah, agreed, Ryan. I think to just jump on a couple things that you mentioned there is I think the first thing is stop treating all vulnerabilities as equal. All criticals the same, all mediums the same, et cetera. And the volume problem, the noise problem, isn't a data problem. It's a context problem, right? So you need to start by overlaying. I think there's a couple things we need to overlay here, kind of in three buckets or lenses. We have exposure, which we're, as MSPs, we're good at. Exploitability, yeah, we can understand that. The third part of the lens, though, is where I think a lot of us fall short, is what's the business impact? And we love our tools, right? We love to push buttons and that, but some of understanding what makes finding vulnerabilities in your clients, a scanner doesn't even pick up, right? You've got to have these discussions with your clients. And I know for us fellow introverts, having a sitting down with our clients and having a business discussion feels a little uncomfortable. But if you practice it a little bit and get into it a little bit, it's really just asking questions to a business owner or a stakeholder. And they love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about their business and get them talking. So you can understand beyond the scanner, what are some of the other vulnerabilities the organization may have? Competitive risk, difficulty with contractual obligations to enterprise clients they sell to, a lot of friction in their sales process because of security questionnaires. You really start to dig in and get a better idea of the organization's vulnerabilities. And like I said, scanners don't pick up on people and processes oftentimes. They could be the result of a poor process, as an example. But when you talk to a client, have that business discussion, you start finding out what their revenue drivers are, what their competitive kind of environment looks like, the things that are conscious in their mind that they see as risks. And then you can start, better understanding business impact, because they might have cloud resources. You start talking to these organizations and you start whiteboarding. We love our whiteboards, right? We're engineers. So draw it in a whiteboard format, right? fluffy clouds and boxes and triangles and all that stuff when you're talking to your client and you're understanding, okay, this is a critical business function. It's driving 80% of your revenue. Let's unpeel that. What is the people, process, and technology? Well, wow, you've got a lot of data that goes out of your boundary that a scanner is never even going to pick up on, right? Cloud resources, shadow cloud, other storage areas, that kind of stuff. So have that business impact and business discussion. I know it feels uncomfortable, but you practice it a little bit and you get better at it. So, but exposure asks, is this asset even reachable from the outside? Ryan just touched on that. Is it public facing, internet facing? Exploitability asks, is there a known exploit in the wild for this? Can this vulnerability be exploited? And back to the business impact, if this system goes down or is compromised, what's the business impact? What critical business functions stop? And from my experience, when you stack rank those findings through those three lenses, you shrink the mountain of data and noise down to a handful of really actionable priorities. And I think I know we're going to talk a little bit about automation, but this came to mind. This is where automation can really help, especially when we can automatically map CVEs to real world exploit activity and then use AI to map to business context. I think that's going to have some real powerful way to whittle down the noise in a way that clients and executives can understand it. And then the reporting shifts from, like Frank mentioned, 10,000, right? You can shift the reporting from, here are 10,000 vulnerabilities that Frank, your sister, wouldn't even begin to understand, right? You can distill that down to, here are the 10 vulnerabilities that impact revenue this month, or patient care this month, or whatever that is. You can really start to narrow it down to the revenue or mission vision kind of stuff. And that's what executives care about. Once we start speaking that language, vulnerability management becomes a business intelligence function and not just a checkbox or a chore.
That's right. And asking adjacent questions or related questions around that. Which one system, if it went down, would bring your operation to a halt? What is, if you're not talking to the CEO and there's another executive decision maker that reports up to the CEO that you're engaged with, what is important to you? How are you gold, right? So it's important to understand the structure of the organization that you're working with and understand, what business drivers are going to impact their decision. So if their CRM went down and it brings them to a crawl, okay, that's going to be higher on that assessment list for example, right?
Yeah, but
So
maybe their computer systems aren't as important or near as important as their phone system. Maybe their phone system's mission critical, and you
that's
don't
right.
know those things until you have that kind of conversation. Ryan mentioned that one system. Sometimes there's one person that can push the button on the one system. So now you've got a people vulnerability and risk, right? That one person can push that one button that keeps that most critical system running. So that's where the business conversation has to come in and marry with the vulnerability data.
Awesome. Great conversation. That was, I really enjoyed that portion. To keep us on track, I am going to move on. I want to make sure that we get through all of these in a timely manner and then still have a little bit of time for key takeaways, Q&A, etc. All right. So third element, or the third question here, what's the most effective way to translate a technical finding like an unpatched server into something that resonates with the CFO or CEO? And this is a direct, transition from the previous question. It's just a carry on. Good, Ryan.
Yeah, I think this is that translation phase, right? You kind of start with assessment and identification. You then start to prioritize, but then you need to translate. You need to communicate back out what the plan is. So, again, keeping it simple here, you never talk about the patch. Okay. Don't talk about the patch. Talk about the consequence of not patching, right? A CFO or a CEO, they do not care about CVE IDs. What they do care about is protecting the system that runs payroll, or reducing downtime associated with ransomware, or whether cyber insurance policy is going to pay out, or did an audit finding from a scan, is it going to affect a contract renewal? Those are things that get them to care about what you're finding. So instead of saying, hey, I have an unpatched server, you say, hey, this server that runs your quoting system has a known vulnerability that's being actively exploited. And if that goes down, you guys can't sell. So here's the cost to the business because you do X amount of revenue, and here's what it's going to cost for us to fix it. That's a much better conversation than coming in with the big fat report with 3,000 CVEs and saying, your stuff's on fire, you need to fix it. Right? You have to tie back the technical finding to the business impact. I can't say that enough. And I also think it's the golden opportunity for an MSP or a technical advisor to not be seen anymore as just the IT guy, right? When you ask questions to your customers about their organization and how they operate, how they thrive, how they make money, how they produce customer service, they will tell you everything. Your customers will tell you everything about their business if you ask the right questions. They can be simple questions, but that's when you can start to really unpeel and uncover where are those critical business functions and processes that they do that allows them to carry out their mission. And their mission is always, at least in my view, the mission's always one or two things. It's either revenue, because they're in business to make money, or it's customer success. And I'm thinking about education and nonprofits where they may not be so concerned with revenue, although they need it. They're more concerned about people and process. So again, if you ask your client just one simple question, hey, tell me how you guys make money here. What do you do? And keep asking those questions. They will talk and talk and talk and give you all the context that you'll ever need to tie back all this vulnerability data back to. So that's a tactic I like to use. And I think it's a great moment for MSPs to get closer to their customers and be seen as an advisor to the customer, not just the IT folks, not just the, blinking lights or something's not working, call these guys, but rather an advisor across the organization. So that would
Right.
be.
Before we transition this over to Brian, and that's a great answer, it dawned on me, it struck me that, while we're talking scans to strategy today, while we're talking about vulnerability assessment and management, this conversation really should begin with your initial onboarding of any end client, your initial engagement with any end client. By setting that foundation and understanding what their critical infrastructure is from day one, and then reinforcing that through your, quarterly meetings or whatever your meeting, cadence may be with them, you already understand what their
Yeah,
critical infrastructure is and which CVEs need to be prioritized over others, right?
absolutely. And
And
nothing
if you haven't,
creates that.
yeah, sorry, Ryan, go ahead, continue,
Sorry,
please.
Frank. No, again, passionate about what you're saying because it's so true because nothing creates more credibility as an MSP to your customer when you speak their business language. When you understand what's important to them, that's when you start to transform into strategic advisor and not just the MSP IT guy anymore. So very well said, Frank, for calling that out. I agree. That is step one for every MSP. As you onboard a new customer, you should be having that. I think we call those business impact analysis or a business questionnaire. You definitely need to be doing that, right?
That's right. And if you haven't done it, don't panic. You're fine, right? I haven't had that conversation with some of my clients yet. We're at the cusp of a new year. Now's a great time to start setting up those conversations in Q1 if you haven't had those conversations with any of your end clients before. Sorry. Go
Yeah, no,
ahead, Brian, we're going to
Frank,
kick it over to you.
just put an exclamation point on that. Now's a perfect time, right? If you haven't had that conversation, is get with your client and get their attention. Say, hey, I want to make sure going into next year, you don't have to spend $1 more than you have to on security and compliance. And I need to make sure that what we're providing today aligns with your business. I know your business has changed a lot probably over the last year or two. Would love to sit down and make sure that we're providing the right services and solutions that align to align best to your business, right? And there's a great time of year, Frank. I'm glad you mentioned that. And one thing, I don't have a lot of material to add. Ryan covered it well. I think that the key is to move out of the TLAs and FLAs, right? 4-letter acronyms and 3-letter acronyms, the TLAs that we talk about, and move from vulnerability language to that business risk language, right? And an unpatched server isn't interesting at all to a CFO, right? But like Ryan said, if you say, hey, this unpatched server hosts client data and has a known exploit being actively used in ransomware campaigns or whatever, now you've got more of their attention. And like Ryan said too, they don't want to hear anything about CVEs, EPSSs, KEVs, or whatever. They want impact statements. And so equation, and I'll finish this idea up with this, but an equation I use sometimes is called kind of the boardroom equation, if you will, or leadership team equation. And think of it like vulnerability, right? The weakness plus the exploitability plus the business function, right? That's going to equal the executive relevance to your statement. So vulnerability plus exploitability plus business function. And think of it in those, and I'm kind of regurgitating those 3 lenses, but in a different way. That's what's going to be relevant to your client's leadership team, executive leadership team. And I think when we present our findings this way, I think the conversation naturally, organically shifts from why is this server unpatched to more of what's our plan to reduce this business risk. That's when your vulnerability management is speaking, I think, the language of strategy and not so much security and compliance.
Yeah, great. And just to build off of that, if you're having these, and I know I'm supposed to be the facilitator, but I'm feeling a little passionate about this right now, so I apologize. But if you're having those conversations on and reviewing what their, critical business systems are on a regular basis, when something does come up, and oh, by the way, we all know something will come up, you can now reframe the conversation. What are we in? We're in November. Hi, Steve. Met with you last month for your, QBR. During that QBR, as we always do, we recapped your, critical business systems. Hey, red flag, a new critical alert came up. I need a patching window. I need to take your systems down. I need to do whatever to get this up to date, right? So by doing that on a regular basis, you can reframe it immediately. As soon as something pops up, put in that call and say, hey, I need to execute on this because you told me on numerous times that this was a critical piece of infrastructure for you. Let's get it fixed up this weekend or after hours. Okay. I digress. Moving on. But it's also a great transition into what our next question is going to be, which is essentially, how can, MSPs and the security team within those MSPs reframe some of these findings in a way that help business leaders, actually care and act. I touched on it a little bit, but Brian, I'd like to start off with you for this one, because I think you were touching on it with your last answer.
Yeah, and Frank, you hit the nail on the head in terms of having the discussion and putting it in context. If you can call up your client and say, hey, we've discovered weaknesses in the systems that are driving 80% of your revenue. Remember, you in our last QBR, you said 80% of your revenue comes from transaction processing fees. There's some big things that we need to get in there this weekend and fix. And I'm going to send over a statement of work. It's significant, but I think it's important that we get this done. Again, you've tied it back to the 80% of their revenue from transaction processing fees. And you can tie everything back. And this is important to relate to your client, is if they call a widget a gadget, make sure you're always calling it a gadget. If they call their clients customers and not clients, call them customers. Make sure you have those kind of little notes go a long way in being relatable in how you're framing things. And when it comes to vulnerability management seen as this cost center and reframing, I think you reframe it by tying vulnerability management to business resilience, right? And brand trust. Every executive, every organization already spends money on things like insurance, compliance or contractual type of stuff, lawyers, legal, and they invest in their reputation, right? And so vulnerability management, I think, supports all of that. So when you can show trend lines, for example, like we reduced exploitable vulnerabilities by 40% quarter over quarter in the systems that support your transaction processing fee, or something like that, that you're connecting directly to revenue. I think Ryan said a couple of times, discovery is about, learning how your the revenue drivers and how your client makes money and being able to tie those things back. So it's not a cost story. It's a risk reduction, return on investment story, right? And it's all about shifting perception from a compliance requirement to more of a competitive differentiator. I think when you can show that your clients have lower residual risk, faster patch cycles, fewer downtime incidents, that kind of thing, you're not selling IT services, you're selling kind of operational confidence, right? And I think it's a subtle but powerful message, is that every patch, every scan, every risk decision is part of your client's cyber maturity narrative, right? It's helping them tell that story to their auditors, regulators, partners, clients, investors, that kind of thing. And it's what turns, I think, vulnerability management from a cost center into more of an asset.
Ryan?
Yeah, nicely said, Brian. I think we're, and I'm saying we're, I'm playing MSP here. I think that we're kind of a victim of why it's being seen as a cost center, because I think MSPs have presented vulnerability management like a cost center. That's what we've been doing for a long time to our customers. And what I mean by that is we are just handing our customers giant lists of problems without connecting them to the outcome that they value. That's how you turn something into value. You have to think about, well, what does the customer value? It's not CVEs and patches not being installed, right? They don't care about that. So I like to reframe vulnerability not as a cost center, but as a way to prevent financial losses, a requirement, right, for cyber insurance and regulatory. I think we've called that out. That's always a real easy one. A requirement for compliance and contracts. Again, usually pretty easy to latch onto that. Reducing operational downtime, reducing, I think Brian said, avoiding reputational damage. All of these things are what vulnerability management programs protect. So again, rather than talking about and sharing big old lists of reports, I like to reframe the vulnerability management program as a tool to promote business continuity and resilience. And it happens through that translation. The moment you start to say, hey, this vulnerability is putting your revenue operations at risk, that's a much different statement. Or, hey, this is a control one of the auditors is going to ask about. Now you have my attention. Auditor, what? Hold on a second. Say that again. What control? Go ahead and fix it, please. Right? Again, so it's all about, you got to think of, be the customer for a moment. What do you value at that company? And tie all of your stuff back to it. Everything ties back to it. And that's our job, I think, as MSPs, is to figure out where are those threading moments and where can I start to connect the dots. We use our tools to identify and get all this intel. And then we need to take a moment and translate it into how does it impact those business processes, those business assets. Ultimately, stop selling patching, start selling resilience and continuity, because that's what vulnerability management is actually doing.
Awesome. Because I had contributed a couple of times during the conversations, we're now officially 3 minutes behind, and I'm nervous. So I'm just going to jump right into the last question. How can and Brian, you touched on this towards the beginning of this section of the of the webinar. But how can MSPs use AI and automation to help enrich their vulnerability management programs?
Yeah, Frank, you want me to take that one first?
Yeah, I was directing that one at you first, Brian. Sorry.
Got it. Hey, yeah, no worries. But yeah, automation and AI is going to replace all of us, so we might as well just give up. No, I'm just joking. No, automation and AI are force multipliers, right? They make In my opinion, they make vulnerability management scalable, especially if we want to put in all this context enrichment and all this other stuff, right? Every client can't be a snowflake, and it's just not going to scale right. Right. So the goal isn't to replace human judgment. It's to amplify it. Right. And automation handles the heavy lifting, right? Continuous discovery, even prioritization if we have our assets tagged, and ticket creation, even patch verification. But that takes 80% of the manual noise off your team's plate. So think about that. If 80% of that noise and data is off your team's plate, you can focus on the things that matter. Some of the stuff we've talked about today. Then AI steps in, right, to add intelligence. It can correlate the CVEs with different things, threat intelligence feeds, detect patterns like recurring misconfigurations, even generate business impact summaries automatically for the executive reporting, right? So for MSPs, for us, I think the power move is to integrate these tools directly into your PSA, RMM. And so remediation becomes more of this closed loop system. You go from reactive to more predictive, from drowning in alerts to being able to manage by exception, for example. So the future of vulnerability management isn't about doing more scanning, right? I think it's about doing smarter prioritization, right? And AI gives us this, I think the ability to turn a lot of this raw data into actionable, defensible, and client ready insights at scale.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to differentiate there because, again, at the end of the day, I think AI is an accelerator for this. And just like it's being used to attack us on the offensive side, we can use it on the defensive side as well, kind of to help us. And again, we're talking about enrichment of the vulnerability data, right? So being able to prioritize vulnerabilities using real world threat feeds. So again, I'm thinking about the SysAkev, I'm thinking about the NVD, I'm thinking about EPSS, and all of the threat intel that's out there. AI allows us to connect and scan and correlate that data much faster now, right? The days of being mundane spreadsheets and thousands of log files that, analysts used to have to kind of do the old fashioned way, AI is accelerating that. And so what that means is we're able to spend more time on security that really makes an impact as opposed to wasting a bunch of time on all that old mundane tasks. So I'm seeing AI as a real helper so that I can focus more on actually reducing risks and protecting things that are actually exploitable as opposed to just being bogged down because I got 20,000 things and I can't possibly review them all today. So I see AI is really helping. And then, Brian, I think you hit on it too. I'm thinking about integration capabilities, right? This entire industry and ecosystem was really built on having tool stacks and having stacks of technology work in and around each other. And so I think, the old way was API stacked on top of API, stacked on top of API. And to do that, you had to have developers and you had to have a lot of information to do that kind of work. And AI is now making it easier for us to connect systems together. I'm thinking about like identity management systems, right, that have identity security. And now I'm able to correlate that to technical vulnerabilities. And again, I'm starting to get better threat intelligence out of that. So I think the ability to connect to external systems, whether that be threat enrichment, also alerting, workflow, ticketing systems, right? All these other pieces that kind of connect into this. AI is making it easier for all of us to do that. You don't have to be an expert anymore, and you don't have to have a pre-built integration really anymore. A lot of times you can take advantage of AI to really help you do those translations and interpret data for us. So I'm loving what I'm seeing in the AI space in terms of partners using it. We always hear, oh, AI is going to take us over. Going to take no way, man. AI, we are the operators and the governors of AI, right? We need to still be there to tell it what, where, and how. So from where I'm sitting, I'm not too worried about that. So, but again, you got to embrace it. I think you got to use it, and we're already seeing that in the industry with some of those examples we've shared.
Awesome. All right, so let's bring it home to some final thoughts. Ryan, do you want to kick us off and then kick it over to Brian with some final thoughts here?
Yeah, so we've said the word defensible and defensibility quite a bit today, and so we just want to clarify from the ConnectSecure lens what we actually mean by defensible. To distill it down, it's being able to prove what you say you're doing. Okay, being able to prove it. And so at ConnectSecure, we have a strategy that we follow that starts with a program supported by a policy, supported by an SOP. And this, to me, is what actually creates defensibility, right? Because now I can show that I've been scanning, I can produce the reports, but I can also produce the intentions and the overall strategy. And again, I'm going to align these and authorize these with my leadership teams internally, but also with my customer. This is how we set scope. This is how we set boundaries. This is how you set expectations. Because if you don't do none of this, guess what your customer thinks? You're just doing all of it. What do you mean you're not fixing all my vulnerabilities? What do
Mm-hmm.
you mean you didn't scan all of my machines? I thought you could get to my SCADA systems that were in the DMZ that don't allow agents on them. You have to define those things. So I use the program and the policy as a way to build that strategy, define roles, responsibilities, define scope, define shared responsibility matrix, all the things you need to do to become defensible. Because I can promise you, if you've ever dealt with a breach or an incident or any of those bad words, one of the very first things, auditors are going to come looking for is this. Do you have a policy? Do you have a document? Did your customer sign off anything? And if you don't have that stuff, you're in trouble. Just plain and simple, you're going to be in trouble. If you have this stuff and you've went over it, you are going to limit some of your liability, if not all of it. And very rarely are you going to be absolved of all of it, but I can tell you, if you have these documents in place, you're gonna be a hell of a lot safer and make yourself defensible. So this is what we mean by defensible. And again, ConnectSecure has these documents. So if any of the partners are out here are interested or want to see them, compare them to your own, or this could be the beginning of your own collection. We would love to share those with you guys. So this is what we talk about when we mean defensible. We're talking about the actual documents that nobody likes to write, nobody likes to look at.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, I took a screenshot of this and shared it with my internal team prior to today's webinar. Brian, thoughts to add?
yeah, just real quick. Yeah, as we wrap up, I want to leave with one, maybe two quick thoughts here, right? Vulnerability management isn't about finding weaknesses in systems, table stakes. We all do that. It's about finding gaps in alignment between technology, leadership, and strategy. And some of the best MSPs are the ones that who are really truly elevating their client relationships, aren't just running scans and sending reports. They're building that bridge. They're building a bridge between IT and the leadership team. They're helping clients see that cybersecurity isn't a cost to contain, it's a capability to invest in. So if there's one thing I want you to take away today, other than scanning isn't a strategy, it would be don't let your next vulnerability report be the end of the conversation. Again, we're introverts. We just send that report over and hope they read it and can understand it, right? Don't let that next vulnerability report be the end of the conversation. Make it the beginning of a business discussion, right? And if you're wondering where to start, here's something that I think you could do right away. Pick one of your top clients and map their top 10 vulnerabilities to three things: exploitability, exposure, and business impact. Okay. Then sit down with them and say, here's what actually matters to your business this quarter, right? In that QBR kind of format. That single conversation, I think, is going to elevate your role from a service provider to that almighty strategic partner. Right. And at the end of the day, leadership alignment, I think, is vulnerability management. Right. When we help business leaders connect the dots between risk and results, they stop reacting to cyber threats and start we could start leading through them.
Awesome. Great conversation today, gentlemen. Sincerely appreciate it. Where's my mouse to advance the slide? There it is. So, final thoughts. Identify and align to a standard. Establish the VM program, policy, SOPs. That was the previous slide, right? Hopefully, I dropped a little hint in there. Everybody took a quick screenshot of that slide. If you want additional documentation and support around that, engage with your ConnectSecure team. They do have additional documentation, as Ryan had shared. Ask questions to find the CBAs and prioritization. We talked about that early on in the organization, in the conversation. What's important to the end client? What is that critical business infrastructure that they need to protect? Protect what matters most. Scanning is not a strategy, right? Just doing a one-off scan is not going to get you there. Have those conversations at the beginning of the year. Have those conversations when you're first bringing on those end clients. What's important to you, right? And then just stop chasing all of your criticals and highs. Align your patching, align your remediation to the critical business infrastructure that you had previously identified. Okay. We got about 6 minutes left. We are over time. We're going to have to speed it up here, gentlemen. So Ryan, talk to us about some of these partner resources.
Yeah, so again, quick, easy URL out there. All this is on that page, connectsecure.com/resources. Again, these are some of the resources that are out there. It's about partner success, partner enablement. So, we want to co-manage and work with you guys to build out your cybersecurity practice using vulnerability management as that entry point. We think it's one of the best entry points in. So we've curated a bunch of resources to help organizations not just have the scanner, but also have some of that defensibility behind it. And then, of course, the support that you need, right? So there's humans here at ConnectSecure. We've got US-based team in Tampa. We provide chat and email support. So if you need help, you can jump into chat, talk to us real time. You get a dedicated account manager at ConnectSecure, whether you buy direct from us or through Pax8. We have a dedicated account manager for you guys on both sides, again, so you're not doing this by yourself. You shouldn't have to. And then again, all the documentation, all the video content is out. It's publicly available to you guys, so you can take a look at what kind of content we're providing, what resources are out there. And then, lastly, I want to just highlight the last two items there. We have a pro service and consulting team at ConnectSecure. So if there's organizations out there that you want to use a vulnerability management tool, you want to have a program, but there's a gap in the talent, the time that you have, we can co-manage that with you guys. We provide consulting with you guys to kind of help you build that practice out. And then, of course, our ConnectSecure Certified Administrator Bootcamp. This is a 4-day, 12-hour bootcamp training that we have curated to really take a organization from just the scanner all the way to having an actual defensible program like we highlighted today. So we actually have a bootcamp training designed to do that. So these are some of the things that we do. Again, it's about partner success and enablement. We just want to make sure organizations have the support they need and have SMEs at their disposal. So we like to do that here at ConnectSecure.
Great, thanks for that overview. And we also want to make sure that everybody is aware of the promotion that we are currently running together with ConnectSecure. So instead of a normal $299 price, we've worked together with ConnectSecure to offer a $99 per month, price point for you folks. And that is in effect until February 28th. Okay. So engage with your Pax8, sales team, understand what that looks like and take advantage of it. Powerful tool. ConnectSecure has been with Pax8 for, I wish Sri was on the call. 4 years, 2021. I think that's right. So, a long time vendor partner of Pax8. Yeah, and we have a lot of partners that are, using the ConnectSecure solution. It's been, a mutually beneficial relationship for Pax8, for ConnectSecure, and most importantly, for you folks, our partners. All right. Where'd my mouse go? There we go. That's it. That's all we had today. Any questions or any final comments, Ryan, audience members, anything else before we wrap it up today?
I would just leave with a 30-second final thought on, I think you nailed it, Frank, and Brian. I think you guys, think about as you head into 2026, we're coming around the corner and do a new quarter, a new year. And this is a really great time to dust off those policies and those program documents. If you have them, get them off the shelf, rehydrate them, and use this as an opportunity to start having those business impact conversations with your customer, right? This is a great time to, I love how Brian frames it. Don't spend $1 more than you have to on security and compliance. I think that's a wonderful way to kind of start a conversation. So I would just encourage the MSPs to continue to get closer to your customers about their business. So when you collect all this fun tech data, we know how to tie it back. So that's what I leave you guys with.
Perfect. And I think that was Brian concurring with the proverbial thumbs up there. Awesome. I love it. Hey, before we wrap up, I saw one of the attendees, David Pirtle. Thanks for hopping in. Good to see you again, sir, so to speak. Hope everything is well with you. To all the attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. Sincerely appreciate it. Lots of good content. Hope you grabbed some screenshots. Hope you took some copious notes. A lot of good information was shared. For more information on the special offer, please reach out to your Pax8 sales team. Everybody have a great day, and thanks again.